Hello, viewers. Let's talk about brewing duration. How long should you ferment your rice wine? So, what are the important criteria for planning how long you're going to ferment your rice wine? So that's the topic for today, brewing duration. If you like this video, please click that like button and subscribe, and then click that bell, and the bell will notify you whenever I post a new video, which is every week. Every week I have a new video on the subject of rustic Asian rice wine. And please share this video wherever it is appropriate. I appreciate your help in spreading the word about rustic Asian rice wine. And what that means is, friends, family, acquaintances, anyone who might be interested in brewing or drinking rice wine, show them this channel. I appreciate it. So let's get into it. So one thing you could do is just, find a recipe and follow it. And usually there's a duration in the recipe. But that's not the only thing you need to do. You always need to observe. Use all of your senses. Observe the bubbling. Listen for bubbling. Do you smell alcohol or sourness or sweetness? You should taste it as well. So that's how you're going to tell, when you're following a recipe, not just exactly following the duration given in the recipe. You should use all your senses to observe the brew, and that's going to give you a better sense about when to finish the fermentation. Now, that first of all, that assumes you already have a recipe. What did you choose a recipe with a short duration or a long duration in the first place? And a lot of that depends on what your goals are. What's your goal? What kind of brew, what kind of rice wine are you trying to make? So let's talk about the end characteristics of a short fermentation versus a long fermentation. So for a short fermentation, the characteristics I think of are freshness and carbonation and some harshness. It's the alcohol doesn't have time to mellow out. It's probably going to be a little harsh. It's especially fresh, and you're going to get that refreshing carbonation. It's especially rustic and fun to have a short fermentation. Now, on the other hand, the long fermentation, the characteristics I think of are that it's smoother, it's more rich in flavor. So it has time to develop more complex flavors, but also to become more mellow. So even though it probably has a little bit more alcohol in it as it ferments, it's not as harsh. It should be more mellow. And also the longer fermentations can be aged as well. So the short fermentations, you expect to drink that relatively quickly. And on the other hand, the long fermentations, you expect to be able to might want to keep that longer, let it age a bit, and also use it for changju. Pour off the top clear layer, and that can be preserved for years in the fridge. Keep those characteristics in mind when you're choosing a recipe, whether you want the short fermentation recipe or a long fermentation recipe. So let's talk about the recipes. What makes a recipe have a shorter fermentation time? Well, it could be the temperature. It could be fermenting at a warmer temperature. There could be more water in relation to rice. If there's by weight more water than rice, that's what I would call a wet recipe, and that's going to ferment faster. Also, if it's warmer, it's going to ferment faster. And also, if you use more enzymes, so that means more nuruk or some way to boost the power of the enzymes in the nuruk. If you do that, that's going to push things along faster as well. So those things make the recipe go faster. If you have those things in the recipe, it's probably a shorter fermentation time. And then, so opposite of those things, so brewing at a cooler temperature using less water. So let's say a 1-to-1 rice to water ratio, or less water than rice. That's going to slow things down. Also, if you use a recipe with multiple stages, that's going to prolong the fermentation time. Oh, and another difference is that the short fermentation time, you're likely actively monitoring and stirring it frequently. And the recipe with a long fermentation time, you're probably more hands off. Once it gets started, you basically leave it alone and let it do its thing for this long period of time. So that's another contrast between the short and the long recipes. Now, one thing to realize is that most of the alcohol is produced at the beginning of fermentation. So you probably can tell the difference in alcohol by taste between a 1-week fermentation and a 1-month fermentation. I'm not sure, but you probably can tell that. But definitely between like a 3-week and a 4-week fermentation, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. There's not that much alcohol produced in the last week of fermentation. So keep that in mind as well. The short fermentations actually produce enough alcohol. You don't need a long fermentation to produce the alcohol, but it does affect the flavor of the overall brew, in that the long fermentation is likely smoother than the short fermentation. So I want to give some examples of brewing duration. So first of all, the very first recipe I ever brewed from the primer on brewing makgeolli. This is a Danyangju single stage recipe with godubab, and the recipe, as stated, is supposed to take 7 days, but you monitor it, and mine took longer than 7 days the first time, I think, but it's about 7 days. And a lot of the brews I've done later on were 2-stage brews. Those 2-stage brews I often brew for 2 or 3 weeks. So that's just what I do. Just I like the flavor around that time, and of course you should use your own taste to judge when you want to stop fermentation, how long you want to brew for. But that's what I do. So single stage, I generally do a week, maybe 10 days, and 2 stages I do for 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm going to give some other examples of brewing duration from this booklet called Sewell. This is a 150-page booklet from the National Research Institute of Cultural Heritage of South Korea. And so here's some other examples. On the quick side, here's Soksanju. It's basically emergency alcohol. It has to be a single stage, and you do everything you can to finish it between 1 and 10 days. So that's going to be brewed at a warmer temperature, and it mentions the nuruk is pre-soaked to make it more effective and quick at turning the starch to sugar. So that's something this is basically emergency alcohol. You have to prepare a lot of alcohol in your village in a hurry. This is the recipe you use. You just have a few days, you can use this recipe. So that's soksangju. For a longer recipe, here's a kind of chongju called chongmyeongju. Chongmyeongju brews for 21 days. And here's a more refined alcohol called gyeonju gyodong bapju, and that ferments for 50 days. Here's another one, and it is flavored with flowers, called myeonchon dugyeonju, and it brews for around 82 days. 82 days. Another famous heritage alcohol is samhaeju, which is brewed over the course of 3 months. So it takes around 100 days to prepare samhaeju. So you might notice the pattern here. The simplest and the shortest durations are the recipes that I'm most familiar with, and the longer durations are the more high-end alcohols that are more specialized and used for maybe used for ritual purposes, and they're not the everyday alcohol. So the everyday makgeolli is going to be the quick stuff, and the high-end alcohol with a fancier name and preserved for some time to be used on special occasions. That's the kind of alcohol that has the long brewing duration. So I hope this gives you some ideas for your own brewing. First of all, decide on your goals, what you want to accomplish, and with these characteristics that I've mentioned, choose the kind of recipe that matches your goals, and that'll tell you what an appropriate brewing duration approximately is. And then beyond that, beyond just following the duration given in the recipe, you are going to have to monitor it and see if it's progressing, according to plan, and it's tasting good, and hopefully, it might take several tries. It's okay to experiment, try different durations and brewing temperatures, but converge in on the result that you want. And so that's my advice for brewing duration. Hope you found this interesting. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Thank you for watching.